There's a narrative in the Old Testament that I honestly consider the most disturbing of all the Bible. It could be seen as inappropriate for minors. Therefore, before continuing, I want to emphasize that this content may not be suitable for all ages and could revive past traumas. I'm referring to the story that unfolds in chapters 19 to 21 of the Book of Judges. Many are familiar with chapter 19 but do not continue to understand the development of events. I believe there are several valuable lessons that we together can draw from this disturbing narrative. First, I'll recount the events in the most engaging way possible, and then we'll explore the lessons we can learn. Join me in the Book of Judges, chapter 19. In the first verse of chapter 19, in the days when there was no king in Israel, a Levite residing in a remote region of the hill country of Ephraim took a woman from Bethlehem of Judah as his concubine. It is important to understand that here we have a Levite man living in the north of Israel, and he chose this woman to be his concubine or wife, however you prefer to call her, who in turn resided in the south in Bethlehem. Moving forward in the story, she was unfaithful to him and returned to her father's house in Bethlehem of Judah, where she stayed for 4 months. She betrayed him and returned to her paternal home in Bethlehem. Then, the narrative continues. This Levite wants to win back his wife, so he travels from the north, from the hill country of Ephraim to the south, in Bethlehem, to find this woman and resume their relationship. Upon arriving there, her father shows great hospitality. On several occasions, the Levite expresses his need to leave, saying, "I need to go. Give me my wife so I can return home." But her father insists, "Stay a little longer. Enjoy the hospitality and rest before your long journey back." He then agrees to stay. Days pass, and each time he tries to leave, the father insists that he stays a bit longer. This situation repeats over several days until finally the Levite, recognizing the generosity of the hospitality he received, states that he really needs to leave. He needs to return home. Thus, he finally departs with his concubine. The tragedy begins as they are traveling from Bethlehem in the south of Israel toward the north, in the direction of Ephraim. When they are near Jebus and the day is coming to an end, the servant suggests, "Please, why don't we stop in this city of Jebus and spend the night here?" But his master responds, "We will not stop in a foreign city where there are no Israelites. We will continue to Gibeah." Then the servant proposes, "Let's try to reach one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah." They then continue their journey, and the sun sets as they approach Gibeah in Benjamin. Upon arrival, to their surprise, no one was willing to receive them into their homes. Hospitality was a crucial aspect of Israeli culture. At the end of the night, an old man appears in the square and asks, "Why are you still here? Has anyone welcomed you into their home?" They reply, "No, no one has welcomed us." The old man then says, "You know what? You can stay with me tonight." The Levite responds, relieved, "Excellent, I just want to let you know that we don't need anything. We have enough food for our donkeys and for us, me and my concubine. We just need a place to rest. If you give me a pillow, that's all I need." And the old man agrees, "No problem, you can stay with me." Thus the Levite, his servant, and his concubine spend the night in this man's house in Gibeah, unaware of the dark events that were to come. Then, while everyone was having a good time, a shocking incident occurred. Suddenly, malicious men from the city surrounded the house and banged on the door, demanding that the owner, an elderly man, hand over the man who had arrived as a guest so they could sexually abuse him. At this point, the narrative takes a surprising and disturbing turn. There were depraved men in Gibeah, all Benjamites, who approached the house of this old man and declared, "We know you have a visitor. Bring him out so we can abuse him." The host then came out and pleaded, "Please do not commit such wickedness, my brothers. This man is my guest. Do not perpetrate such atrocious barbarity. Let me bring out my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. Abuse them if you wish, but spare this man such disgrace." Moving forward in the story, what happens next is unbelievable. According to the account, the old man, unable to convince the assailants, handed over his concubine to them. They raped and mistreated her all night until dawn, when they finally released her. I ask you to reflect on the severity of the narrative. This tale can be quite disturbing and evoke painful memories, as it describes a group of men taking turns to abuse a defenseless woman, an atrocity that lasted all night. At dawn, the young woman, exhausted and desolate, returned and collapsed at the door of the house where her lord was staying. It is possible to imagine how worn and wounded she was after being abused all night by those men, barely having the strength to drag herself back and simply collapse on the porch. What happens next is even more tragic. According to the narrative, when the Lord got up in the morning and opened the doors to continue their journey, he found his concubine fallen near the entrance of the house, with her hands on the doorstep. He then called to her, saying, "Get up, let's go," but received no response. She had been so brutally abused that she was dead. The man, in a shocking act, placed her body on his donkey and took it home. What follows is profoundly disturbing and cruel. Upon arriving home, he took a knife, dismembered his concubine's body into 12 parts, and sent each piece to the different tribes of Israel, accompanied by a letter detailing the atrocious event perpetrated by his own brothers from the tribe of Benjamin. This horrible act shocked all who became aware of it. The other tribes, upon seeing and reading what had happened to the woman, affirmed that nothing so terrible had occurred in the history of Israel since the Exodus from Egypt. There are many layers to this story, especially in chapters 20 and 21, which we will explore later. For now, let's focus on some valuable lessons we can extract from the narrated events. The first lesson is about the importance of accountability in our lives. As we observe in Judges chapter 19 verse 1, which mentions a time when there was no king in Israel, it highlights that without the need to be accountable, without the fear of having to justify our actions, we are more susceptible to making wrong decisions. We believe that we can act in isolation, without consequences, which clearly contributed to the tragic events in Israel. There were laws, but they were neither respected nor enforced, leading people to commit unimaginable acts. The second important lesson is about respect for human dignity, recognizing each person as a bearer of the image of God. The attitude of the man who considered it wrong to abuse the visitor but offered his daughter and the concubine instead reveals a devaluation of female life and virtue. It is essential to treat all human beings with equality and respect, regardless of gender or status. This reflection leads us to a broader discussion on how we consume content on the internet. If there are contents that we know are inappropriate or harmful, it is essential to recognize the humanity of everyone involved. Imagining that each person on the screen is as valuable as a loved one can help promote a change in perspective and behavior. The third lesson, which is a crucial point of this video, is the need for continuous reflection and dialogue about our actions and their repercussions on society. It is important to always seek to understand the consequences of our acts, both on a personal and collective level, and to strive to make choices that align with ethical and moral values. As we move away from God, we become more vulnerable to committing acts we never imagined possible. Observing the book of Judges in its entirety, we perceive a nation that slowly drifted away from God, culminating in the tragic events of chapters 19 to 21. This progression clearly illustrates how far the nation as a whole has moved away from its foundational beliefs and values. This is an important reflection for all of us, as we are no different. Maintaining a close connection with God is crucial. Without it, like the Israelites, we may find ourselves in unthinkable situations. For example, someone might say they would never get divorced, never have an affair, never be fired for inappropriate behavior at work, or never get involved with drugs. However, as we drift away from our values, those impossibilities can become realities. The story does not end at chapter 19. Unfortunately, the situation worsens with a civil war in chapter 20. The 11 tribes of Israel engage in direct conflict with the tribe of Benjamin, the ones responsible for the horrendous act committed against one of their own. This civil war results in thousands of deaths on both sides, and in the end, only 600 men from Benjamin remain, leading to concern from the other tribes that, without Benjaminite women, the tribe of Benjamin might become extinct. Now they face another dilemma, the concern over the possible extinction of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, which leads me to the fourth lesson. Every bad decision we make carries consequences that we cannot choose. Although the actions of the Benjamites were wrong, the decision by the other 11 tribes to fight and kill was also a choice, and now they need to deal with the repercussions of that decision. In the same way, the Benjamites suffer from the consequences of their actions. You can choose your actions, but not the consequences. Every decision brings results, and we personally cannot select those outcomes. In an effort to resolve the situation, the Israelites killed men from the clan of Jabesh Gilead and took 400 women who had never been with a man to give as wives to the 600 surviving Benjamites. However, a new problem arises. There are 200 Benjamite men without wives, as only 400 women were provided. This is a classic example of how one bad decision can lead to another. The Israelites, trapped by an oath not to give their daughters to the Benjamites, find themselves at an impasse. The solution they find for this problem is morally questionable. They suggest that during a festival where young women will be dancing and having fun, the Benjamites could capture the women they need, since technically they would not be giving their daughters, just allowing them to be taken. This complex story shows how bad decisions can create vicious cycles of poor choices, negatively impacting many people. In the case of the Benjamites and the festival, the decision to kidnap women during the celebration reflects a desperate attempt to solve a problem, but only perpetuates injustice and suffering. This action affected not only the kidnapped women, but also the communities of Jabesh Gilead and the families of the women. However, the narrative brings us a final and valuable lesson about divine grace. Despite the terrible decisions and actions, God allows the tribe of Benjamin to rebuild their cities and continue their lineage. This does not mean that the consequences of their actions were ignored or irrelevant, but that even in the most challenging situations and after serious mistakes, there is room for a new beginning and redemption. The book of Judges concludes with an observation that resonates throughout the work. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This underscores the importance of leadership and moral guidance, as well as how easily we can stray when these elements are lacking. Thus, this story is not just a historical account. It is an invitation to reflect on the importance of our choices and the vast ripples of consequences they generate. Every decision matters, and often their repercussions extend far beyond what we can foresee. In moments of decision, it is crucial to seek wisdom, divine guidance, and discernment, and to consider not only our immediate needs, but the well-being and rights of others.